So hopefully those first 4 shots are exactly what you're looking for in your golf game. A great strike, whether it be wedge, 6-iron, fairway wood, or driver. And I'm going to talk you through today, probably, I think, one of the most important things that golfers are completely unaware of that massively influences strike, path and face, and really influences how accurate and how far you hit the golf ball. So I'm going to work through the bag like I did on those first 4 shots. I'm going to hit a pitching wedge, a 6-iron, a fairway wood, and my driver. And it's really important to understand that as long as you get good at what I'm talking about here, every club in the bag you will hit better than ever. So I'm going to start with the pitching wedge. I'm going to set up, I'm going to get the ball in the middle of my stance, so very much opposite my sternum, and then I'm going to make a swing and just give you a little bit of feedback. So good solid strike, straight at my target, and the really key number I'm looking at there is the low point distance, which is 3 inches after the golf ball or ahead of the golf ball. So low point of the golf swing, I think, is really such an important thing. So golfers are often told that they need to hit down with some clubs, hit up with other clubs, and you need to hit down different amounts, and it can be a very complicated thing. So let's just break the golf swing into its simplest movement. So from face on, with every club in the bag, that club head is basically moving in a circle around your body. And obviously the circle gets bigger as the clubs get longer, but the club works up, it works down, reaches its low point, and then travels back up. So the really key thing with every golfer is if you can be consistent with how you deliver the lowest point of the golf swing and where the lowest point is, then by potentially moving the ball position around, the club's going to travel down to the low point. So the further the low point ahead, the more the club's traveling down, which is what we'd look for with very lofted stuff. If the low point was slightly ahead of the golf ball, it'd be traveling down but shallower, and ideally with driver, the low point will be behind and hitting up. So you don't need to think about hitting down and up, just have the ball in the correct part of your golf swing so that the low point is correct and that gives you what you need. So let's start with kind of, I would say 7-iron down to your wedges. So we're going to put the ball very central in the stance, so kind of opposite the sternum. And I always like to feel, for a lot of golfers, that maybe just have a little bit more pressure. So just move the hips a little bit more towards target, almost so you're kind of pre-setting slightly ahead. But then all you're looking to do is, as you're swinging back, you'll feel your weight shift slightly into that right side. But as you reach the top, you want to feel that those hips move towards the target, and then that's almost falling towards the target, and that is going to move that low point ahead of the golf ball, and I could see where I was touching the ground there. Now it's really important that the low point is in the ground. So if you're on turf, obviously that'll be the deepest part of the divot, but on the mat you want to feel some interaction, because I see golfers make great swings, low points ahead, but it's above the ground, and by the time the club tracks back to the ball, they've topped it or thinned it. So we're going to get ball central with the wedge, a little bit more hips towards the target, and then move aggressively towards the target in the downswing. So I didn't feel my best swing, but low point 3.5 inches ahead, club's a little bit from the inside, face was 2.5 degrees closed, carried 135, rolled out 144. And if I'm going to strike my wedges solidly, I've got to feel that low point is ahead, but also when the low point's ahead, it's encouraging a bit more forward shaft lean. I see a lot of golfers that get the low point behind, that almost are this way at impact. So that's the short stuff, 7-iron down. So now I'm going to move up to 6-iron, show you the difference. Right, so 6-iron. I'm still looking for the club to be traveling down, but maybe just not quite as much as the pitching wedge. Now, I would ultimately say, and this can depend a little bit on every golfer, I would say not every golfer gets their low point in the same place. So some golfers I see, even when they're excessive, they're only slightly forward. Some people will be a long way forward. That's where you need to be a little bit flexible on ball position relative to the individual golfer. Now, if you do want a video on that, comment below and let me know, and I'll do something a bit more full explanation on that. If you're somebody who hits it too high, too low, how moving that ball position, understanding your low point, is going to improve your shots. So I'm now going to move the ball just very slightly forward of centre. I'm going to have that same feel at address with my 6-iron and just try and make the exact same movement. Again, felt solid. So you see, I wasn't quite as good, but my low point was 1.3 inches ahead. My club path was 2 degrees from the inside, club face 1.5 closed, and carry at 174. So I would take that with 6-iron. Wasn't necessarily my best movement, but we'd see there the low point was still ahead, but slightly less ahead. Therefore, the club's coming in a bit more shallow, and I'm keeping a little bit more loft rather than fully de-lofting at impact. So obviously, as you go 5, 4, maybe 3 or hybrid, that ball might just move a little bit further forward. But then we move into the fairway woods, which is where I think a lot of golfers really struggle. They try and sweep it away. Anytime the golf ball's on the ground, we would still like the low point to be ahead of the golf ball, even if it's only a slight amount. So we could see there with my 6-iron, I was only like 1.3 inches ahead. So I'm now going to have that ball maybe just half an inch forward of where I had 6-iron, same feel of hip slightly towards the target, and treat the fairway wood exactly like an iron swing. That one just a little bit pushy, but low point slightly ahead. Club path 0.2 degrees from the inside. Club face a little open, which is why it stayed out there, but carry it 211 and total at 226. Now, you eagle-eyed viewers might notice there that my path's been a little bit different on each swing, and I'm not saying I swing exactly the same every time, but when golfers come to see me about they think there's a path issue, your definite issue with low point can affect that. I just want you to understand this, that obviously as the club's traveling down to get to the low point, if we look at it down the line, as the club's traveling down, it's moving from the inside and more out to the right. So you could definitely see there that the further ahead my low point was with wedge, then 6, and then with 7 wood, the club was actually more from the inside with the shorter clubs. So kind of even though the paths are different, that's more about ball position. And again, you can play around with ball position and low point to affect your path. But if you can get good with those off the ground, every single time we want that low point ahead or after the ball so that we get that lovely ball and then ground contact. Now, the final club for the video, and probably the one that most golfers struggle with, driver. So I think most of us are aware that if we can get the club traveling up, which would mean low point behind, we're going to launch the ball a bit higher and maybe keep a bit of spin off it. But I have noticed, and you might have noticed this, that most golfers tend to slice the golf ball. So there can be a danger that when they're trying to hit up, obviously the club is working more up and left, so out to in. So it can make the shape of shot worse, which is where aligning the body to the right and feel like you're swinging more to the right can make a big difference with the path. But I'm going to talk about if you were somebody who did hit down and had the low point ahead with driver, it might cost you a bit of distance, but you might find you'll be more accurate because it'll be more like the delivery with the iron. But for me, I'm going to try and get my low point behind. So I'm going to set the ball much further forward. I'm going to close my stance slightly. I'm going to have my hips slightly towards the target, but just feel there's a little bit more spine tilt. And then make my swing. Hopefully low point behind. We'll get a good drive. I can take that. So a little bit low on the face, but we can see low point 6.5 inches behind. Path was dead straight at 0. Club face is showing slightly open, but that's more down to strike. And even though it wasn't my best one, 243 carry and 274 total. So like I said at the start of the video, the ability to control your low point in your golf swing is a real key thing for controlling strike, path, and face, because remember, we're catching the ball when the low point's in a different place, in a different part of the golf swing each time. So if you can get more consistent with that low point delivery, which get yourself set, move those hips towards the target, and when you get to the top, shift towards the target. In theory, the low point is going to be very much opposite that lead armpit. It might not be for some of you, it might be a little further forward, it might be further back. But be a little flexible with ball position, but control your low point and just become the best ball striker that you can be.